Anyway, so here's the question. So Alex says, I'm a single minimalist, not opposed to a small but pleasant living space. I have healthy savings and sufficient salary job lined up in the end of summer. I know I'll want or need to buy a property sooner rather than later. I found attractively priced leasehold studio condos with 7 years on the lease. I think that's the key word, 7 years on lease. Question: should I consider purchasing before even arriving, assuming the property meets my needs and budget, and find a trustworthy agent? Well, we know who the trustworthy agents are. That's the easy part of the question. So let's take Alex's question over here and kind of expand this into a discussion about leasehold properties. So here's Alex. He's thinking about buying a leasehold. First of all, a quick definition: leasehold, as the word says, is lease. You are leasing the property. You don't own it. Bring it up this way. A leasehold property, as the word says, you lease the property, just like you lease a car. That means there's a term. And when the term is up, the property goes back to the landowner unless there's a renegotiation, an extension of the lease. So it's not at all like a traditional buying. And because of that, the prices will fluctuate. Now, Alex says he's got 7 years on the lease. That means after 7 years, if there's not a renegotiation of that lease agreement, the property goes back to the landowner. Typically, there will be a renegotiation, but you don't know what the new lease amount, which is a monthly rent, there's a monthly rent per se. It's not a rent, it's a lease, but there's a monthly lease amount that you have to pay for that property. So real quick, a primer on that. But leasehold, is this going to come back? I mean, Scott, what's your advice? And Scott's saying no. What's your advice for leasehold? Hit this first one first for Alex. 7 years on the lease. Should he go for it? Number one. And number two, what do you think about leasehold potentially coming back as this market continues to kind of skyrocket?
Yeah, I don't think we'll see leasehold coming back, and it's because the unintended consequences that came down. I mean, you got to look at the history of what leasehold, why it was created. It was created for affordability, right? Which is the point you're kind of talking about, Peter, is will it come back? Because we're getting into prices where people deem it as unaffordable, right? And you're trying to make housing affordable for locals. The problem is they were set on like 99-year leases, and everyone goes, we're not going to have to deal with the problem for a long time down the road. And less than 1% of properties on Oahu are leasehold. So it's not many, but when you have these buildings that are coming due like this, and you have 400 units and 400 people in these units, the city does not want to evict these people, because that's what could happen if the landowner says, I want the units back. They can take them back, fix them up, do whatever they want, resell them, rent them, release them, however they want to deal with it. And that's just a nightmare. In fact, back in 2005, I think it was, or early 2000s, the city council passed a bill trying to force landowners to sell the fee. They went to court, they found it unconstitutional. And then what they did, the state gave significant incentives, in fact, no capital gains tax, if the landowner sold the land to the condo owners, effectively making it fee simple at that point. So I don't think they want to get back into that. There's some that are left, and I think they'll stick around for a little while until somebody eventually sells the land. But it's not, there's the unintended consequences down the road are too big of a headache. To his answer, what he was asking, the question is, it's obviously not the same kind of asset or the same kind of give you the same kind of financial stability. Are you, what is that cost benefit analysis to you? You have a risk that in 7 years, you may be walking away from the money you're plopping down on that. If it's cheap enough and it's going to be less than what rent is going to be, and you don't care that you're going to walk away in 7 years, fine, buy it. That's a decision you got to make in your head. This unit, the first unit I ever bought, was leasehold, but the landowner had died and there were 3 owners, and I ran the numbers, and I'm like, these guys aren't going to want to keep the land. They're going to want the cash and get out. I took a risk on that. The renegotiation fee was coming up, and they ended up selling it. So, and I had a discount on it because of that. Now, you got to be really careful. It's just a more risky purchase, and you have to analyze whether or not the money that you're putting in, is it okay if you have to walk away from it? Sanssouci down on the beach has 2 years left on the lease. You can buy a studio unit right on the beach for $200,000 to $250,000, and you may be walking away from that money in 2 years. Is that worth it to you?
That's a great point. I'm going to come back to I'm going to come back to you later, Scott, with a question about the current will the current leasehold market prices rise? But let's talk about that later because I want to get to Heidi. Heidi, what's your sense? What would you tell? First of all, what would you tell Alex here? Alex, who's asking about this leasehold condo, sight unseen, by the way, 7 years on the lease. Buy it before I write. Let's kind of hit that one, and then what's your sense of what's going to happen? Where do you see the leasehold market going on Maui?
Well, I mean, leasehold and sight unseen are kind of two different things to talk about. But I'll talk about the leasehold market first. Is leasehold coming back? It's not coming back in the sense there's going to be more inventory of leasehold. However, so every year that goes by in a leasehold, you have a year less on the lease. So logically, you think, well, it's going to go down in value every single year. Well, that's not how the leasehold market works at all. Leasehold markets appreciated significantly over the past few years. And the reason is people look at leasehold and compare it to what else they could buy that's fee simple. So, I mean, I've sold leasehold and they've doubled in value. And it just depends on where the market is at that time. And I'm noticing, because we're in a super strong market right now, is leasehold properties that probably would have been sitting on the market in past years are selling quicker because we just have less inventory in general. And the prices, I mean, $300,000-$400,000 to get something beachfront is just way more affordable and attractive to somebody versus spending $1 million. So, I mean, the leasehold market is, I don't know, kind of coming back. And then I don't know, do you want to talk about the sight unseen?
Sure. Yeah, hit the sight unseen one.
My recommendation to buyers is, if you can, I mean, if you can make it over to Maui, you should try to come over and see the property you're buying. If you've been to the area many times, if you know the neighborhood, if you know the condo complex, you can probably do things virtually. I mean, I do a lot of FaceTime tours with buyers, and we have a lot of technology to look at everything. But I think especially if you haven't been to the area, been to the neighborhood, it's worth getting on a plane and coming over, because it's a big investment in real estate. So, I mean, totally up to you as the buyer, how much risk you're willing to take. But I mean, even with all the video tours and 3D tours and everything, I mean, there's nothing like seeing a property in person.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. I mean, like you said, I think the qualifier would be if, for example, you had gone to a resort destination, a given property, and you go there, let's say every year, and you know it like the back of your hand, and a unit in that building goes for sale. Yeah, maybe you can get that one unseen, but other than that, it's like the difference, as you were saying this, Heidi, you're so right about it. You could do all the videos and photos that you want, but it's sort of like the difference between looking at a map of a trail, right, versus being on the trail, right? There's a difference. There's a difference of looking at the map and being actually on the trail itself. Scott, Heidi touched on what I kind of want to come back to you on, which is, yes, leasehold's never going to quote come back and Heidi well expressed, as an increased inventory. There won't be more properties coming on the market for leasehold. But what do you think is going to happen to the existing properties on leasehold? Have you been seeing the price movement? Are they also going up, although maybe not as much? Are they also going up as well? What do you see happening as far as that goes on leasehold?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, whenever you're analyzing the market in general, looking at what you're going to do, if fee simple prices have gone up considerably, then considering leasehold, you're going to compare that, right? You're going to see, okay, well, wow, that's way up here now. Look how affordable I can get this. But you have to analyze every leasehold property in and of itself, because every single leasehold property, let's say a condo building, for example, you got two different condo buildings. They're both leasehold. One could be $30,000 for a 1-bedroom unit, and the other one could be $500,000 for that leasehold unit. Why? Because the lease on the other one and the lease terms are significantly better on the other one and longer and further out. And the one on the $35,000 one is up in 3 years. No leases are the same. Every single one of them is different. There's periodic step ups, there's renegotiation periods, and then there's the end of the lease term. And they can all be, none of them are the same. So you really got to analyze property by property and then analyze it to what your options are out there. And then you make the decision. So naturally, with a market going up like this, yeah, it increased the leasehold component. It will never get to the speed that we're dealing with fee simple properties because of that leasehold element, because of the fear of the unknown of, okay, what happens at this trigger point? What happens when the lease expires? What happens when there's a renegotiation? You don't know. So there's always a longer lag time, days on market and things with leasehold.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question fee simple is the way to go, and that's by far. A couple of questions have popped in. Tom Kerr, Tom joined our fall 2021 Islander Ohana. So Tom, looking forward to working with you. Tom says, I don't intend to buy a leasehold condo, but I've been watching leasehold condos in Poipu in Kauai, some 20 plus units in one complex, because I learned the monthly lease fee rent is up in 2022. As a result, I've seen some healthy price drops. Yeah, Tom, exactly. I mean, you think about it, right? So the lease fee is going to be, the lease rent's going to be up. Now, I don't know if it's been negotiated yet, what it's going to be in 2022. They may or may not have negotiated. I'm going to guess that the reason why you've seen those price drops is because one of two things. Either they know what the rent is going to be in 2022 and it's substantially higher. So Scott, like to your point earlier, it's this cash flow thing. It's almost like the interest rates going up. The price has essentially those lease rents going up, Tom, have increased the price of the condo. And because if it's increased the price of the condo, the quote selling price, the lease price has gone down. So that's kind of what you're seeing, some most likely what's going on because of that. Here's one from Dwayne. Say you have 7 years left on the leasehold. Couldn't you ask that? There you go. That's what Scott says. Yeah, Scott says, no, it's going to cut me off. Couldn't you ask to do a subcontract? Thanks, Scott. Couldn't you ask to do a subcontract to guarantee a renegotiation on that 7th year? Scott, you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, essentially what happens, the association, so all the unit owners are a part of association, and the association board will typically hire an attorney. There's a couple of attorneys that specialize in this, and they'll engage the landowner with negotiations for an extended contract, an extended lease, or a renegotiation, whatever it is, in bulk. And sometimes the landowner will make the fee available, and usually when they make the fee available, it's in bulk. So 75% of the owners agree to buy and 25% don't. The association will try to buy that 25% out. So then the association becomes the fee owner, and the unit owners pay the association the lease rent from there going forward. That's a good scenario where I've seen it transition. But yeah, the association negotiates in bulk. The landowner does not want to deal with individual owners. He's going to say, take a hike, move on. That gets way too complicated.
It gets, yeah, it's one big huge contract. Quick, Tom says, also aren't many leasehold condos purchased by investors as VRBOs versus a full-time resident? Could be. It all depends on the math, Tom. It's still the numbers are the numbers. There's the price that you pay to get the fee, and then there's the monthly price that you have to pay as far as the lease rent. Can you make that and then there's maintenance fees, etc. Can you make that balance out? Is the market willing to kind of have renters pay more? Can you make out? Some do and some don't. And I would think in that case, as an investor, you're going to care less about the lease expiring because you don't care. The only question is, you can get back a good return on your investment. Gene Reynolds says, fee simple is the only way to go. I've been in a leasehold and was happy to sell it. Scott, I got my booster vaccine at Kapiolani Hospital. So there must be some inside game there between you and Gene about the booster shot. Scott,
I sold her leasehold unit for her many, many years ago. One of my favorite people. Hi, Gene.
Awesome. Hey, Gene.
And helped them with the other side.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and look, and Scott, we've talked about this before. Your first property was leasehold. My first property was leasehold, and I bought it because it was a bunch of things. It was affordable. I believe I had. This was a long time ago, but I had something like 30 or 40 or 30 years left on the lease, so there was no way I was going to worry about it. And I only held the property for maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years. I don't know how long it was, and I sold it. And right timing, got lucky, blah, 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 doubled my money on it. It was amazing.
There's nothing wrong with leasehold. It's being informed with what the decision that you're making. That's it. You don't need to shy away from it necessarily. If it fits and you're educated on it, it might be a good way to go.
Yeah, and like you said, I think that's well put. Know what you're getting involved with. Know what you're getting involved with. Just a funny side note. Some of you may remember this. I mentioned before that first leasehold. This is so funny. That first leasehold condo I bought was a 1-bedroom unit, $64,000. That's what I paid for that. $64,000 for the 1-bedroom. So think